my name is Sabrina Kirby, and today I'll be talking about the U.S. participation in World War II and everything that contributed to us winning the war. World War II started on September 1st, 1939, whenever Germany invaded Poland. The United States had placed itself in a state of isolation in which it set of neutrality acts that they did not want Americans to travel on ships of those in war or sell weapons to those in war. As tensions started growing in Europe, the United States became closer to the Great Britain. They allowed for the cash and carry sale of weapons, which allowed them to pay with cash as long as they exported the weapons on their own ship. Because Great Britain became bankrupt from this cash and carry deal, the Congress decided to pass the Lend-Lease Act in 1941. This allowed Americans to sell or lend their weapons and other items to Great Britain. This was soon opened up to the Soviet Union after Germany's invasion. In 1941, the Atlantic Charter was signed. This was a declaration between Great Britain's Prime Minister Winston Churchill and the United States President Franklin Roosevelt. This was not an agreement of going to war or being allied, but this was an agreement of going to war against specifically fascism. Yeah, and it also set a bunch of policies and stuff so then that they could go to align with this. In 1940, the United States got possibly confronted with the Two-Ocean War after the Tripartite Pact, also known as the Berlin Pact. This was a pact between Italy, Japan, and Germany, allying them together. Because of this, the United States decided to release the Selective Training and the Selective Service Act. This brought about 1.6 million into the Army. On December 7th, 1941, Japan aircrafts bombed a naval base on Hawaii called Pearl Harbor. This killed about 2,000, damaged about 8 battleships, 187 aircrafts, 18 naval ships. The next day, on December 8th, 1942, Congress went into discussion and decided to declare war 388 in favor against 1. Because of this, Germany and Italy then declared war on the United States because of the Berlin Pact. Right here you could see in the red would be the Allies, the United States along with Canada, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and the Axis powers, which would be Italy, Germany, and Japan. After the war, because of the Selective Service Act, it recruited many. By December 1941, about 2.2 million soldiers were enlisted. They underwent severe combat and physical training, and because of the draft of 1942, it required all men from 18 to 64 to enlist, mainly focusing on ages 36 and younger, and taking into consideration their occupation, their family situation, and their health. That's how men were recruited. They had to go through physical and psychiatric exams, and after passing this, they got fingerprinted. They were asked their preference of branch, even though they would be placed where they were mainly needed. Then they would sign their induction papers. They would receive their serial number, and then finally their oath. Later on in the years, they required new recruits to go through a deeper evaluations, more vaccinations, and higher aptitude tests. All these men were unified, and they had to wear the same haircut, the same uniform. They all had the same weapons. Their barracks were also very tight in space, and there was no room for their personal items. Many men did volunteer for the war. specifically because they wanted to pick their own branch. A lot of help from home occurred, having to do with rationing, industry transformation, financial aid, and material recycling. So rationing occurred because of a thing called K-ration. They would take certain items like chocolate and chewing gum and they would package it and send off to those in war. One of the main items used in this would be sugar, and sugar was also used for dynamite and gunpowder. Because of the need for sugar, we would ration sugar, meat, and coffee, and specifically to the sizes of their family using rationing cards. People were also urged to eat their leftovers and to cook from home using vegetables from victory gardens. Victory gardens were placed in parks, backyards, and vacant lots. They were also given victory recipes, which would tell them how to use their food to the most that they can without wasting any. Speed limits were also rationed and regulated, as well as tires. Them both being because the United States didn't get any natural resources from Japan. Speed limits and gasoline were reduced because they wanted to ensure that there would be less wear and tear on these tires. The industry was also transformed in order to make war-specific items. Things like General Motors, Chrysler, Ford Motor Company all created things other than the cars that they were creating. Before the war, about 3 million cars were made. After the war, a total of 139 cars were made. The United States was making about 2/3 of the Allies' equipment. So they created about a total of 297,000 aircrafts, 193,000 artillery pieces, 100,000 armored vehicles, 2 million trucks, and synthetic rubber was also created in order to supply the need of tires. War bonds being sold to the Americans. They also increased taxes by a lot. A total of, in 1939, less than 8 million people did their taxes. And by the end of 1945, 50 million people had done their taxes. Another way that the community helped was by hosting salvaging drives, which people would create rubber, tin, nylon, paper, and metal, and that they would donate it to these drives. Rubber was used for tanks, planes, and vehicles, and metal was needed for ammunition and ships. Steel pennies were also created to replace the copper pennies because of the need for copper, and the 5 nickel was no longer made because of the need for nickel. Okay, right here you could see they're going around and kind of advertising, you know, the people volunteering of collecting scraps. It says, let's help slap the Jap right off the map with our scrap. So with this, it's telling people pretty much like, we could win this war if we collect these scraps. Here's another picture. You could see them collecting, it's really blurry, but you could see them collect a lot of metal stuff. I could see like a bed frame right here. And they look all pretty happy doing it. Like they want to help the war. On February 19th, 1942, the Executive Order 9066 was passed. This required all Americans from Japanese descendants in the West Coast to be moved to internment camps. About 120,000 Japanese were moved from homes and jobs. They sold their businesses and houses and for their savings, even though they pretty much lost all these savings. About 79,000 of these Japanese people were American citizens. In 1942, there was a court case, Korematsu versus the United States. This pretty much ruled as the United States' actions of these internment camps were military necessity, and it was constitutional. In 1984, the conviction of Fred Korematsu was revoked. By 1988, the Civil Liberties Act was passed, which allowed the payment of $20,000 to all surviving members of those internment camps. If you look right here, here's the notice of who had to go. Right here, you could see the line where all of the Japanese descendants had to move out, which was named the military era. They had to move out and placed into internment camps, either in the lines or on the outside of the lines. These internment camps were very harsh, and they were in the desert. There was no air conditioning or anything like that. They were uninsulated. There was barbed wire, fences, security posts, and searchlights. And right here you can see where it's harsh desert. Okay, in 1939, the Franklin Roosevelt received a letter from Albert Einstein saying that the German Nazis were already at work of an atomic weapon and that we should probably start doing one too. So the United States spending about $2 billion on a secret program that created atomic weapons. It was created of scientists and engineers, about 6,000 of them, and they would use radioactive plutonium and uranium for their materials. Then they would send these materials to Los Alamos in New Mexico by a team led by Robert Oppenheimer, and they would put these materials together and put it into a working bomb. The first successful test was in the Trinity Test Center on July 16th, 1945. Okay, next is the invasion of Europe. The invasion of Europe started in 1942 whenever the United States invaded North Africa. This was done because of Mussolini, who was the leader of the fascist party, and the leader of Italy, the prime minister of Italy. He had his colonial empire there. So the United States went ahead and defeated them, and then after that, in 1943, they worked their way up and they invaded Italy. Then on June 6, 1944, D-Day had occurred. This is when the United States invaded France at Normandy. About 156,000 British, Canadian, and United States soldiers landed on 5 beaches in a 50-mile radius, and yeah, they defeated France. Then in August of 1944, the Allies, by this time, they had reached the Seine River, which runs through France, and they freed France. December 16th, 1944, the Battle of the Bulge occurred. About 20,000 died. Germans have died, and pretty much the United States had taken over Germany, while on the other side, the Soviet Union was taking over, trying to push Germany towards the Americans. And the only way that the Germans could think of a reasonable way to attack back is by creating a bulge in the line of army. So then they settled their men in a little area that was more ahead than these other military groups from the Allies. Then finally, on May 8th, the United States had declared victory on Europe, also known as V-Day. Okay, so right here you could see the map. You could see where the United States started here. They took over North Africa, and then after taking over Mussolini's empire, they went ahead and went up and completely conquered Mussolini. At this point, they had been pushed to here, and so that's whenever the United States and their allies came and invaded France right here at Normandy, and then they pushed their way through And during all this, you can see the Soviet Union working its way over. So it's not allowing Germany to be able to escape at all. Next we have is the invasion of the Pacific. Starting on May 1942 at the Battle of the Coral Sea. This is whenever the United States intervened the Japanese from invading Australia. On June 3rd, 1942 was the Battle of Midway. Basically, the Japanese had planned on attacking the United States, but United States code uncoding people had figured out the Japanese communication code, and they prepared for their attack. They destroyed about 4 of the Japanese aircrafts and many of their battleships. In August 1942, the Battle of Guadalcanal had occurred. Basically, this was a surprise attack on the Japanese on their air base that they were just constructing on the Solomon Islands. Then on July 1944, the Battle of Guam occurred. This happened from July 2nd to August 10th, 1944. Next we have the Battle of Leyte Gulf. This was in October 1944. Actually, going back to the Guam invasion, Guam used to be under the United States control all the way into 1941 whenever Japanese took over. So the United States got Guam back. After this was the Battle of Iwo Jima. This was on February 1945. Basically, 21,000 had died, but everybody knows it for this famous picture. These are Marines setting up a flag. This was a very bad battle. We lost a lot of Marines in the making. There is a statue in Virginia that is from this. Okay, and on April 1st, 1945, the United States landed on Okinawa. So right here you could see the United States slowly going in and using a method called island hopping. This was in order for them to get closer to Japan, so it would be less of a risk for them to attack Japan. You know, Japanese couldn't intervene with any of their operations, and plus, like, it would be less like flight distance for the bombers as well. So you can see them working their way here, and then they use the land to find like where they're going. Okay, and then right here you could see Iwo Jima, and then here's Okinawa. So that's pretty close to the island in order for them to get an advantage. Then after the invasion, in July 1945, President Truman, who was now our president because Teddy Roosevelt had died, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Britain, and his successor Attlee, as well as the Prime Minister of the Soviet Union, which is Stalin, they had come together to discuss Germany and what they were going to do with it, basically talking about their military administration, and that they were going to put Nazi leaders on trial for everything that they did during the Holocaust and all of that. They also requested a unconditional surrender from Japan, in which Japan denied. Because of this, after Japan denied, on August 6th, the United States dropped a bomb on Hiroshima, which killed about 79,000, and it injured or created radiation, which led to death on about 140,000 people. This bomb, it affected about a 5-mile radius from the island. Then on August 9th, 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, in which it killed 60,000 people, and it affected about a 2.6 mile radius, destroying anything in their way. So right here you could see the three big leaders, or the three big ones. It's I'll start over here. We have Winston Churchill, we have Truman, and then we have Stalin. Okay, then right here you could see how the Allies had split up the Germany land into 4 different places. We have Great Britain right here, we have the Soviet Union right here, the United States, and then France. Okay, right here would be during the bombing of Hiroshima. And then we have the aftermath of Hiroshima. That's horrible. Very bad. Then we have Nagasaki right here. They called it the mushroom cloud. And then we have the aftermath. Still some things standing, but still really bad. Okay, so here are the bombs that were dropped on each of the island. Here's the little boy, which was dropped on Hiroshima. And then we got the Fat Man, which was dropped on Nagasaki. Fat Man was given for the name of it being fat. Okay, after that, the Japanese had announced its surrender on August 15th due to all of the lives that they lost and everything. Like, those bombs literally destroyed so much and they just could not handle it. So they surrendered on August 15th, but then they signed the actual surrendering slip or paper on September 2nd, 1945, ending the World War II. This actually happened on a U.S. battleship, the Missouri, in Tokyo's Bay. So this ship was anchored in Tokyo, on Tokyo Bay, and the foreign prime minister Mamoru Shigemitsu was the one actually fighting it. Shown here. This is Shigemitsu. Okay, so in conclusion, what I believe is that all of these actions that were taken by the United States were required for us to win the war. If we had not done any of this, then I don't think that we would have won. We went really straightforward and we focused mainly on the war and the war production, and that generally helped the war so much. And you know, without each of these aspects, then we probably would have lost. But thank you for watching. My name is Sabrina Kirby, and thank you again.